night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
It's Wednesday on the West, Thursday on the East. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with me, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome JV Johnson.
It's not only Wednesday on the East, but it's 2019. I'm just scratching my head.
2019.
I remember, thinking, well, a while ago now, thinking, wow, boy, the year 2000, that's going to be pretty amazing, but it's so far in the future. I'm never going to have to, never going to. And now we're almost 20 years into the new millennia. It's just really, really difficult for me to accept it.
What's funny, I remember as a kid watching that show, and you might even remember it back in the 80s, it was Beyond 2000. Which was all the futuristic stuff.
Sure.
And we're going to have cars that fly and this, that, the other thing. And of course, none of that ever happened. But it has, I don't know, I will say, like the last 20 years have flown by. And you and I were just talking before we went on air here. I mean, it was 10 years ago. You and I were hanging out up at the Spalding Inn in New Hampshire for New Year's Eve at a big New Year's Eve party up there. Remember that? We used to have some killer parties up there.
We did, and it came up on my Facebook memories, and it just made me laugh. But just to think that was 10 years ago, I just don't understand where the time goes.
And you and I, we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going on 20 years, almost 2 decades. And that makes us really old.
Yes. Does that mean we're common law, whatever that means?
I think we'd have to live together.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think maybe the amount of times on vacation could account. I know
that might add
away
up.
from that.
But speaking of time and time passing, our guest tonight actually has some really, really cool information and research about time and time slips and time travel. Joshua P. Warren, a great friend of ours, is going to be on with us tonight.
Yeah, Josh has been a friend for a long time, just an incredible investigator, and he's done so many different things too. So it's great to have him on. But he's a paranormal investigator. He's involved in all these different things. And I think you're going to be amazed. I think you'll be amazed by the show tonight.
Yeah, and he caught a time anomaly in
Vegas.
in the Las Vegas area. And he's been doing a lot of research on it, and he's going to talk about that. Plus, he's going to talk about Parasimatics, which is the use of vibration, certain frequencies and vibration that actually when you take a surface and you vibrate it at a certain frequency and you put like sand or something on that surface, it'll create a pattern. And he contends, and many people are looking into this, that those patterns are actually sigils. They're actually some kind of paranormal information, and they're related to things like crop circles. So some cool stuff here.
That's so beyond me.
Yeah, but speaking of crop circles, did you see the report of the UFO off the South Carolina coast?
I heard something about it, but I didn't. It's been kind of crazy here the last couple of days, but I'm not sure the details on it.
Yeah, a woman was on her beach. It was taken on an island just off the South Carolina coast, about 25 miles south of Charleston.
Favorite states.
It's Kiowa Island, and she says that she spotted an object about 9:30 in the evening on Christmas Eve. She was on the deck of her home, and she took a video of it.
Santa sleigh?
It may have been. It's red. It could have been
Christmas
Rudolph's
Eve.
nose. Exactly. But it bounces, it stops, it fades, it grows brighter. And people haven't been able to explain what it is yet. A lot of people actually saw this thing. She's the one that took a video of it. There are a bunch of talk about it on Facebook. It lit up brighter than the full moon. And people don't know what it was.
That's wild. Has it been video put out on it?
Yeah, there's a video that's out that she took, I'm assuming with her phone. That's what we do all these days. Everything's taken on our phones. And there's a website called UFOhunters.com. They say that there have been at least 2 other reports in that same area since 2009, including a 2012 instance where the object was described as a very round red light, which is very similar to what we're looking at here.
That's wild. I got to check out this video. Maybe we can get Slick to post it on the Beyond Reality Facebook page.
Yeah, Slick should definitely do that. It's worth it. It's interesting to take a look at. And, anytime we have something like this, and Joshua, our guest tonight, will be able to comment on this one as well.
And it's funny because every time I hear something like that, I go back to thinking again, like you had brought up the Spalding Inn, but I'm sure you remember when we were doing an investigation up there, we had a bunch of people up there. And, a couple times, the planes out of Vermont, the fighter jets would break the sound barrier, and it would sound like a stick of dynamite going
Right,
off in the
yeah.
driveway. Everything in the building would shake, and people would be terrified. But you and I outside one night, and we had Sherry from who was on Ghost Hunters, her husband, and a bunch of people, and it was at night. And do you remember the weird lights that came out of nowhere?
I do.
And it took us a while to figure it out. We had, after making a lot of contacts and investigating, but it was actually the military. And if you remember, they launched these flares off of some of these planes, and the fighter jets intercept them.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, because if you saw it, you would have had no idea what it was. And it really, truly looked at some points just like UFOs in the sky whipping all through.
Yeah, that's part of the problem with some of this is there's a lot of technology that the military uses, not even secret technology.
And they use it at night.
And they use it at night.
People don't see it.
It creates light in a lot of cases, even if it's just light from whatever propulsion it's using, and people can't identify it. And the other thing that tricks you at night, or anytime actually, is direction. When you see something, when something's coming either straight towards you or going straight away from you, it almost looks stationary. Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. It looks like it's stationary because it's fixed in the horizon, as opposed to moving right or left, and then you see it moving much easier. So, you get disoriented a little bit. But this is a pretty unique video. Shows something pretty cool, and I'm anxious to see what Josh Warren thinks about it.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
There's also one more thing that I need to bring up, and it's a bit of sad news. Daryl Dragon passed away at the age of 76 years old, and of course, many people don't remember his name.
Well, Captain and Tennille.
He was the captain from the Captain and Tennille. They had a bunch of hits in the 70s. They had their own variety show on TV for a while, which was kind of funny. I don't know, a couple years it was on. I don't remember. But, yeah, he passed away at 76 years old.
Well, that's a shame, and rest in peace. But you were talking about time earlier, and I don't know if you remember, but the Baba Vanga, who is the female known as the Nostradamus of the Balkans, she passed away back in 96 at age 85. And more than 2 decades since, records of her prophecies still continue to stir the imaginations out there. But she said they claim that she had accurately foreseen such events like 9/11 and 2005 tsunami in Indonesia. But her predictions for 2019 include a new devastating tsunami in Asia, a giant meteorite hitting Russia, an economic collapse for the European Union, which might very well be happening.
I tell you, we've never been closer to that.
Yeah. Additionally, she reported. She reportedly described an assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin and a baffling illness for Donald Trump occurring in the forthcoming year.
Now, wait a second. She predicted all these things and put the 2019. These are things that were specific to 2019.
According to reports.
Okay, so these are probably interpretations.
Yeah, and there's a lot of discrepancies and so forth. The Bulgarian prophet, a lot claim that she went blind after being swept into a mysterious tornado and flung around. And God only knows if that was true as well, but she was blind. You can look her up. Her name was Baba Vanga, Babavanga, and she made a lot of different predictions. Some other ones were between 2170 and 2256, a Mars colony stocked with nuclear weapons will demand independence from Earth.
Ooh. It's a new revolution for freedom there.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Between 2262 and 2304, time travel will be discovered and developed. So hopefully somebody from the future is playing this podcast back, and they can come back and let us know how it went. I think that'd be kind of cool.
I love looking at predictions, and I love it when we can actually go back and look at past predictions and determine whether or not there was any accuracy in there. And when you've got things like Nostradamus, who I think is a fascinating character in history, but many of his things are so vague they can be interpreted to be,
that's true.
Any time. I mean, people said, that he had predicted Hitler, but then they said, no, that was 9/11. And they said the same thing was, no, it was the Gulf War. It was this, that, it's so easy to interpret them in different ways because they're a little ambiguous, that it's hard to really know if he was accurate or not. But I do like it when they're specific and we can actually go back and check.
Well, another one was during the years 4302 and 4674. Humans will have achieved immortality, and they'll be assimilated with aliens. and live scattered throughout the cosmos. In 5079, the universe will come to an end.
Wow. Well, that's a big one.
That's ouch on that one.
Yeah, well,
if you
I guess
just reach immortality.
I was just going to say, immortality doesn't really help you out at that point, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, geez, that kind of sucks. You figure out immortality, and then it's all over. But
yeah. Well, we're talking Oak Island on Tuesday night.
Yeah, Tuesday we got Randall Sullivan. He's the writer and the legendary treasure on Oak Island. So we're going to be talking to him about a bunch of different things when it comes down to Oak Island. And I'm sure a lot of you have been tuning in and seeing the episodes and still kind of at the same place we always are when you're watching those episodes.
Yeah, I'm anxious if anybody's watching that. I mean, I'm taking care of a spider that has decided to drop from the ceiling.
Better than the one that was in my headphone that day. Remember?
Oh, gosh, yeah. If you're watching The Curse of Oak Island on History Channel, you know that the big project for this season is the what's it called? What's the
barrier.
dam? It's Coffer Dam. The Coffer Dam that's going around Smith's Cove, and they're going to excavate that and see if they can find the box drains that were supposedly used to supply the water for the booby traps. And that's going to be a pretty telling excavation when they get working on it. If there's nothing there, I think at that point, I think we probably can conclude that there was nothing there.
I mean, how much do you invest before you say enough is enough?
I guess it depends on the ratings.
Well, exactly. But the technology that we have today.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're still not really getting much further than they did back then.
The only thing you can say right now is that, because of all the excavations that had been done without the technology before, is that the island is so messed up. They don't have any geographic markers. They're not really sure where the money pit is. They can only guess. They have an approximate. So things have been so moved around and messed up that they might be looking in the wrong place and they don't know it. Those kind of things.
But you're also on an island, and your water table has to be pretty high. So how deep do you dig before?
Yeah.
It's never really added up or made sense to me.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear what Randall Sullivan has to say about that Tuesday night when he's on the program with us, because he's written about it, he's investigated, and it's one thing to watch the show on television, which is an entertaining show, but it's another thing to have somebody who's taken a more scientific approach to it and see what they have to say. Hey gang, JV here. You know that great nutrition can lead to a great life. Healthy, happy, rewarding. But that nutrition simply cannot be found in the foods we eat alone. Take a minute and assess your health, the way you feel, the way your family feels, the way your kids feel. Health is more than just feeling well. It's also making sure you have a strong immune system, especially in these trying times. Vitamins aren't enough alone. In fact, they have to be the right vitamins, the right supplements made from the most effective ingredients. Otherwise, they don't do the job. It makes the world of a difference. There's a new website you can visit that'll help you navigate these ideas and guide you to better health. There's no obligation. Just visit myhealthrocksnow.com. That's myhealthrocksnow.com and start feeling better today. Anyway, welcome back to the show. It's Beyond Reality Radio. We're going to have our guests in just a second, but I want to remind you we'll be opening up the phone lines in the second half of the program if you want to join our discussion at 844-687-7669. And tonight we're talking with Joshua P. Warren, paranormal researcher and investigator. He's got his hands in almost everything that would be considered paranormal and more. Joshua, welcome back to Beyond Reality Radio. It's great to have you back with us.
Hey, well, Jason and JV, it is always an honor to be with you. It's a fun show, and so thank you for having me, and Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year, and thanks for coming on, Josh. It's always a pleasure having you on, and we've known each other for a long time, so it's always great to be able to talk with you.
Well, likewise, my friend, I tell you, it's wild because it seems like every time we talk, so much new stuff has happened in the world of paranormal investigation, research, experimentation that it's kind of a whirlwind of information to keep up with. So it's always nice to be able to touch base and sort of explain what's happening right now in the world.
This is a particularly short segment. We've got about a minute and a half, but I did want to ask you if you had seen any reports on or seen the video from Christmas Eve off of the coast of South Carolina that the woman took of the unidentified flying object. Did you happen to catch that?
Yes. Well, my hometown is Asheville, North Carolina, which is about a 4-hour drive from the Charleston, South Carolina area. So I've spent many weekends at Kiowa Island. Very nice place. Fancy, upper end type of establishment. And that whole area is known for an enormous amount of paranormal activity, ghostly phenomena, UFOs. In fact, the history of that area, I think, is the explanation. But what I can tell you about this particular video is that it's unfortunate that all we have is a dot of light in a black sky, because we don't have any great context for what we're looking at. But I am not surprised to think this is a legitimate, unidentified flying object or aerial phenomena or whatever, because it's been quite common around there for, I would say, actually hundreds of years. And when we come back from the break, we can get more into the history of that area if you'd like.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't say that and then just leave us hanging on that. There has to be more to it. So, and we love the area. JV and I are always down there as well, and it's such a beautiful area, and it does have an incredible history.
And one of the difficult things about that area, and you're going to give us a little bit of the history of the paranormal activity in that area, but one of the difficult things is that it's an area with a lot of military activity. Does that kind of taint the waters at all?
Yes, well, whenever you have paranormal hotspots, there is usually some kind of a military installation nearby. And so, hence, we have this sort of, if you want to call it a conspiracy, about whether or not that the military is aware of these areas on planet Earth where strange things happen and studies it. And maybe it's just a parallel interest between these other types of beings and the military, because these are logical places that are strategic for some type of a project on Earth. But nonetheless, looking in particular around Charleston, South Carolina, well, pirates have always been rampant around that part of South Carolina. And, that whole area from really going all the way down to Florida and over to the island of Bermuda, and then, of course, Puerto Rico has more or less been a weird area that we've kind of generally referred to as the Bermuda Triangle. But more specifically, when it comes back to South Carolina, if you look at that coastline from Kiowa Island up to Sullivan's Island, that is where, especially during the 1700s, many of the slaves were brought to this country from Africa. In fact, I believe it is considered the number one port of entry for slaves from Africa. And so it already has this sort of, terrible, haunting energy from all of those people being brought there in chains. But then when they came in, of course, they had nothing to rely on except their sense of spirituality. And the Gullah culture, as they call it to this day, which exists around there, is sort of a combination of some of the African tribal religions, be it Ifa, voodoo type things, combined with some of the early forms of colonial Christianity. So that right there is a huge fingerprint which is unique in the U.S. Now, we move beyond that. Well, in the American Revolutionary War, well, my goodness, South Carolina played an integral role in that. It was occupied by the British, and this is an area that a lot of the political powers were revolving around, where a lot of terrible torment and stuff happened. But then we go up to, of course, the beginning of the Civil War in the 1860s. Well, South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, and the very first shot of the Civil War was fired there at Fort Sumter off the coastline of Charleston. And, of course, that began the biggest, most violent tragedy in the history of this country. And if you continue from there, you see that that area played a big impact, had a big impact in World War II, at Fort Moultrie, and it sort of goes on and on. So basically, bottom line is, when people often ask me, what do you think is the most haunted place in America? I know there are a lot of great candidates. New Orleans, Fort Lauderdale, St. Augustine. I mean, you can go down a list. Asheville, North Carolina, my hometown, very haunted place. You go to the West Coast, you have San Francisco. Yeah, but I always say it's the area around Charleston, South Carolina. And so whether or not, when we're looking at these strange lights, we're talking about ghosts or UFOs or some other type of paranormal phenomenon, it is not at all surprising for these things to be captured around that coastline.
Well, and you're talking about ghosts and everything else. I mean, they have the Pawnee Island out there deal with the gray man before the storms. He's usually letting them know of impending storms, and there's so much more going on. And didn't Blackbeard ship actually run aground out there as well?
Well, absolutely. Well, Blackbeard, he came a little north, and it was around North Carolina, the Outer Banks, Ocracoke, where, Blackbeard met his demise. But you're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because in South Carolina, right there at Pawleys Island, where people have seen the gray man all the way up until last year, by the way, going back hundreds of years, this takes us to the idea of a harbinger, that there are certain places on this planet where people see a ghostly manifestation just before something tragic occurs. And as you fellas know, up until this year, I've spent the better part of the last 5 or 6 years in Puerto Rico, and I even have talked on this program about the incredible amount of harbingers that we're seen in Puerto Rico before, during, and even after the big hurricane hit there. So that's another great example, the gray man of Pawleys Island, and why that this area is one of those places the ancient Europeans would call a thin place, where you seem to have higher chances of glimpsing through the veil into another dimension.
We're talking with Joshua P. Warren, paranormal investigator, researcher. We'll be taking your phone calls later in the program at 844-687-7669. So, Joshua, going back to this video, and then we're going to have to change the subject just so we can get to some of these other things that we wanted to talk about tonight. As I watch it, I see almost looks like an afterburner kind of thing. It's hard to tell because it is, it's just like you said, just a dot in a dark sky. Did you give it any analysis, or is that forthcoming?
Well, I have analyzed it best I can, and here's one thing that will help to give a better perspective of where I come from. For years, I produced and hosted, this was my idea, an event where I got the top hobbyists and sci-fi folks and tinkerers in the country to come together and go out into the middle of nowhere in a field in a place called Barnardsville, North Carolina, and participate in a contest where they would build UFOs. And the only rules were it has to fly on its own accord, and it has to be safe. Now, this is even back before we had drones. And so I saw every type of sort of machine you can imagine, not to mention artistic renditions where some people were so talented. Like one guy named Jim Robinson, he could take different Chinese lanterns and things like that, and he could analyze the wind currents, and he could launch them at just the right time to get them to line up in a gigantic V shape. I mean, it's astounding stuff. And so I have seen what humans are capable of producing, and now that we have drones out there, of course, that makes it even more complicated. So given all that as context, what I can say is that whenever you just have a light, a dot like we have here in the middle of blackness, it is impossible to draw any conclusions. But if I wanted to look at that from the most doubtful, skeptical point of view possible, I would say it could be a Chinese lantern if that was a windless night. But if you don't have the information about the air currents and the temperature and all these conditions, You can't really determine because a Chinese lantern would be moving. It wouldn't be acting like that. And a drone couldn't fly that way either. So I would say it has to fall on that 50-50 line because we just don't have enough information to draw a conclusion. But again, if you consider the history of that area that goes back hundreds of years, it would not surprise me if this was something truly paranormal.
Joshua, we need to turn the discussion to some of the work that you've been doing most recently, although I think you're always working on everything. But tell us about Parasimatics. What is it, and what is it all about?
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of refresh everybody. I think I have probably mentioned this on the show before, but now I'm taking this into a whole new arena, and I'm telling you, literally 1 hour before I got on this show, I just made a breakthrough. And so this is going to be my very first time to actually tell everybody I did this on the program tonight. First off, when I investigated Robert the Haunted Doll down in Key West, probably about 10 years ago, or actually it's probably been more than that, I was the first person who got an opportunity to shine a UV light on him without the glass case. And I saw this strange symbol that was only visible under UV light appear on his sleeve. And I wondered what the heck that symbol was, and it turns out it looks very much like an ancient sigil, which is a symbol that magicians would sort of use as the final stamp on a ritual. So I became very interested in all this, especially because of that. And then at the same time, I, of course, was studying radionics, psionics, psychotronics, things that are more popularly known as wishing machines, which are basically machines that are mind machines that are designed for you to sort of put your thought and intention into. And often these wishing machines and psionic machines use patterns. So it's a very similar thing. And for many years, I've seen how much success that people have had using radionics technology, using patterns. And I'm talking about, not just spooky stuff, conjuring up ghosts and having psychic experiences, but also people doing some very positive things for themselves. I mean, I put some information on my website about wishing machines and psionics, and just last month, a guy named David won $581,000 in the Georgia Lotto using one of the wishing machines. Wow. And then there is a guy named, and this is a fact.
Wait, hang on. I mean, Powerball's coming up soon, so say that again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you, I can email you. I can forward you his email if you want to verify what I'm telling you. There's another guy named Martinez who won over $10,000 in a casino using one of these sigils. Now, all this stuff is available. You can learn all about it at joshuapwarren.com. But the point I'm making here is this is real stuff that's impacting people's real lives. And so I started wondering, how is it that some of these sigils come to be? Like, how is it that they manifest? And it took me back to the work of a scientist in Germany who was also a musician named Ernst Chladni. He lived in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and he would take flat pieces of steel and sprinkle salt or sand on them, and he would run a violin bow down the side, and he would see them snap into all these patterns. And I started looking at a lot of these patterns that we create today using this technique that we now call cymatics. And I saw how similar that they look to a lot of these magical symbols or sigils. And so the way I began this research was by saying, okay, what if I take this to another level called parasimatics, where I take different tones and create these patterns in matter, and then as the tone is being played, I speak a message into it, like I want to attract a ghost, or I want to attract more money, or I want to have psychic experiences. What happens if you take the actual, the pattern the symbol that's created by Mother Nature in that medium, and then you use that as your sigil. So I experimented with sand and salt and all these things, and I finally settled on just water, because water is a great three-dimensional medium that shows these patterns very well. So I recorded a bunch of messages, and I played them through water, and then I started viewing them by different kinds of light, laser light, infrared light, ultraviolet light, and I picked out the type of lighting that seemed to make them really pop, when I'd get that symbol. And then I would take that sigil that I would get, that symbol, and I would post it on my website. And you can find them all for free on my website. As a matter of fact, if you scroll down the homepage of my website, you'll see like 4 of them, but there's a link where you can click it and you can see the latest where I've continued my research. And I said, I'm giving all this out there for free to the world. Let me know if you take one of these sigils and you just put it somewhere where you're going to see it every day, what happens to you? And I'm telling you, the emails that I've gotten every single day, they basically flood my inbox from people all over the world who have had astounding experiences using this technique, just staring at these symbols that I'm giving away for free, like I say, because this is an experiment for me. And I know we're coming up on the break, so what I will tell you is that I now have taken this to what I call 2.0. And when we get back from the break, that's what I'm going to sort of break on your show tonight, what 2.0 is all about.
All right. Before we go to break here, we do have about a minute, and I want to ask you about the process involved here. You're using standard English messages when you speak?
Yes, I am actually using my own voice. Mm-hmm. I am the one who is giving, so that is the subjective part of this. Mm-hmm. So I guess you could call it a combination of art and science. But I don't know how else you do it, because you want to have the human experience involved here. And so I use my own voice to say what the intention is, and that changes the pattern that the tone is creating, and then we have a snapshot of that tone. And by the way, I demonstrated this for over 100 people live in person last year in May here in Las Vegas, where I did a big event. So everybody got to see in person how all this works. And I do have some video footage that gives you an idea on my website as well. But yes, I am interjecting that message, and then I'm capturing that using, like I say, either laser, infrared, or ultraviolet, and then turning that into a sigil that I put on my website and they give out for free, and then people contact me and tell me what they've been experiencing. Wow. And some people are even getting it tattooed on themselves because it's been such a positive thing for them.
Yeah, that's amazing. Not only is that information amazing, which we'll get back to after the break, but the fact that Joshua knew the break was coming up. I mean, we could just actually just walk away, Jay.
It's because he's so used to doing this stuff.
No, he's a pro.
But it's funny you brought up the tattoo thing, because I was going to ask him about that, because it just seemed only logical. I mean, get all those things tattooed on you, call it a day.
Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johaw. That's JOHAW.
It's Wednesday on the West, Thursday on the East. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with me, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome J.V. Johnson.
Did we wish everybody a Happy New Year? I think we kind of did.
We did.
But you can never say it enough. I hope
it's because you're still hungover from New Year that you don't remember that.
I actually played a gig New Year's Eve, which was a lot of fun, but it doesn't give me a lot of time to get into the party side of it, because by the time I'm ready to party, everybody's going home because I'm done playing.
I've partied with you on New Year's.
Yeah, you have.
It can be a violent time.
Violent? I don't think there was any violence, was there?
I just mean to our bodies.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was abusive for sure, yeah. Welcome to the show, everybody, and I hope everybody has made their New Year's resolutions. I know I make mine. I think I already broke it already, but that's okay. I mean, at least I made some.
Mine is to come up with some great ideas for 2020.
That's a realistic
So I've got a
goal.
whole year to plan them out.
That's a great goal. I like that one.
I think ahead.
Tonight we're talking with Joshua P. Warren. He's a paranormal investigator and a researcher, and he has his fingers in almost every genre of the paranormal. And tonight we're talking about several of them, including Parasimatics, his research in converting tones into magical sigils and converting images like crop circles into tones. Plus, we're going to talk about his time machine project. He discovered a time slip near Las Vegas. And last time he was on the program, he was talking about that. Tomorrow night, we've got Rebecca Foster joining the show. She will be conducting her Readings with Rebecca the first Thursday of January. So we're excited to have her with us tomorrow night.
And then next week, we've got Randall Sullivan, writer of The Legendary Treasure on Oak Island. And we're going to be talking to him about, well, just the rumored treasure that's there, the possible reward, just all the stuff that's gone into this search, and if he really believes that there's something there. And so it's going to be an interesting show.
Yeah, and if anybody's been watching the television show, you have to be reminded that season 6 for Curse of Oak Island, the show?
I believe so.
Yeah. So they've been looking for 6 years, but people have been looking for over 200. And, there's been various reports of various things found, but it's really hard to find those things, whether it's the 90-foot stone, which in the last episode they think they may have found, they're not sure. Things like that, that are kind of talked about and written about, but haven't been found.
Well, it's funny, in the last episode that aired, that guy who came out there and was helping him out with the rocks and all that, did he look familiar to you?
He did look familiar to me. Why?
Redneck Rockets, or whatever, that show that they did on History Channel and so forth. He was the one that they actually designed those rockets and were constantly blasting them off and doing stuff out of his garage.
All right, well, that makes sense now.
I was looking at him, and I was sitting next to the wife, and I go, I know that guy from somewhere.
Yeah.
And finally it clicked.
Yeah. I would never have gotten it unless you said it, though. But now it makes sense. Anyway, so we've got a great discussion going on with Joshua P. Warren. By the way, visit his website, Joshua P. Warren, no period after the initial P, joshuapwarren.com. Check out all the information he's got on there. He's got just a wealth of resources and information that you can access for free, plus information about his books. And Joshua, we were talking about your work in parasimatics and the whole concept that vibrations and frequency and sound and all these things that kind of are connected through waves of some kind are really starting to take a spotlight in many of our paranormal disciplines. What's the connection here?
Well, in a minute, I truly am about to break some news on this program here because, again, about an hour before I got on the air, I did something for the first time that I am delighted to report. And, ultimately, it goes back to the connection between all the conventional classical paranormal manifestations and time anomalies. So let's take, say, ghost, for example. That's an easy one. Usually, when people see a ghost, they feel like they are looking at someone or something from the past. And it's not always just a spirit. In some cases, it can be a whole landscape, a whole setting, like an imprint that's sort of recorded in the past. And so that's one form of ghostly phenomena. When it comes to UFOs, again and again, we have these situations where people talk about missing time, or you have the classic scenario where the guy in Texas is driving down the road at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night in his pickup truck, and all of a sudden the Steven Spielberg light appears over his truck, and the truck stops working. And then the saucer flies away, and the truck just starts working again. It doesn't like he has to, it's not like he has to turn the ignition as if it had shut down the engine. I mean, he just was experiencing some moment where he may have still been cognizant of what was happening, but the truck wasn't working. And then, of course, with cryptids, you have these stories that are oft repeated about someone following some cryptid like Bigfoot, and all of a sudden Bigfoot just vanishes, and the footprints vanish in mid-pathway. It's obvious when it comes to psychic phenomena, the idea that people can peer into the future or the past. And so time seems to be the central element to all of this. And when you take that into consideration, and I've written about this for many years. One of my books, like you mentioned, is The Secret Wisdom of Kukulkan, which you can download as an ebook on my website. When you take that into consideration, it definitely makes you think, well, if we understand the relationship between space-time and the human experience, we're going to explain a lot of these paranormal phenomena. So before we get into that, which is a whole other aspect of what we can dig into tonight, let's jump back for a second to parasimatics. So with parasimatics, I was telling you that what I was basically trying to do was take tones and turn them into images, and then use those images as sigils or symbols that a person could be exposed to, and I give instructions on my website about this, to see if being exposed to that sigil would actually give you some of that energy from that message. And you could look at things like, let's say, the Christian cross, for example. I mean, people see the Christian cross, there's an impact there. There's a meaning there. Whatever you think of it, there's a meaning there. And so I was very interested in seeing how tone could create that. But then I realized, oh boy, if I am looking into how to do this, maybe I can take this into 2.0, which is where I am right now. And that is, how can I take an image and turn it into a tone? And this is much, much more complicated, because it's one thing to take cymatics and add a little bit of information to it and then turn it into parasimatics. But to take a tone from an image is a whole different ballgame. I mean, can you imagine if we reverse this process and we could take, crop circles, the Book of the Dead, the Great Pyramids, Stonehenge, the Mona Lisa, the Lord's Prayer, a picture of Zeta Reticuli, a water molecule. I mean, these are things that are images that we might be able to reverse engineer into a tone that would give us some kind of information. And I, tonight, have made a breakthrough on how to do that. So before I continue, I want to make sure that you two are sort of helping me explain this properly.
Well, I just want to, it's easy for me to understand how you would take audio of any kind and make the transition from that audio, which is sound waves that in themselves have a frequency and a vibration to create those patterns. I'm having difficulty understanding how we go the other way, Joshua.
I understand, because it is so much harder.
Yeah.
This is some truly groundbreaking stuff. I mean, I've been working on this now for over a year, and tonight, I was going to do my experiment tomorrow night, but I wanted to do it tonight before I came on the air, just so I could talk about it.
And what you're saying here is that you've actually been able to take images, and by images, do you mean photographs?
Well, primarily, but in some cases, they're things that are not photographed, like a water molecule.
Okay.
I mean, you see, like, that's one of the cool things about this. There are things that will be impossible for me to do in my life. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to be able to travel to Zeta Reticuli. I'm not where they say the grays come from. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be able to reduce myself down to, viewing a molecule. I'm not going to get to travel to Mars. And yet, I'm hoping that I can take images of those things, which in some cases can be photographs, in other cases can be diagrams, and extract a tone from them. But it begins with a lot of subjectivity because, hey, what perspective do you use in the image, right?
This is going to be an interesting. This is fascinating, and we have to take a break here. So let's do that first before we get into the details of all of this, because this is groundbreaking information and groundbreaking science in our effort to explain some of these things.
It really is, and we're going to be opening up the phone lines for everybody too, in case you have any questions at 844-687-7669. Again, toll free at 844-687-7669. Our guest, Joshua P. Warren, and you're listening to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Hey gang, JV here. You know that great nutrition can lead to a great life. Healthy, happy, rewarding. But that nutrition simply cannot be found in the foods we eat alone. Take a minute and assess your health, the way you feel, the way your family feels, the way your kids feel. Health is more than just feeling well. It's also making sure you have a strong immune system, especially in these trying times. Vitamins aren't enough alone. In fact, they have to be the right vitamins, the right supplements made from the most effective ingredients. Otherwise, they don't do the job. It makes the world of a difference. There's a new website you can visit that'll help you navigate these ideas and guide you to better health. There's no obligation. Just visit myhealthrocksnow.com. That's myhealthrocksnow.com and start feeling better today. Welcome back to the program. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV. Our guest tonight, Joshua P. Warren, paranormal investigator and researcher. And Joshua, we're talking about Parasimatics and the idea that you can take audio and vibrations and sound and actually create patterns, which in the case of what we're talking about tonight, you're actually able to use as sigils. And now we're talking about something that's a little harder to understand, and that's reversing the process, taking images and reversing them into what exactly, Joshua?
Reversing them into tones. And you're right. This was so much more difficult that it almost deserves to be treated as an entirely different field. Because basically, okay, let me start by saying, let's say you and I both enjoy the music of Beethoven. But there is no way that we're, apparently in our own lifetimes anyway, going to be able to travel back and sit in some concert hall and hear Beethoven perform, conduct his symphony orchestra. We don't have that available to us. However, Beethoven took a bunch of paper and essentially put black dots all over it in order to represent what he was doing, and passed that along. And so now, in the year 2019, if you know how to interpret those black dots, well, you can play that with a violin, with a cello, whatever, and you get a very close experience to this thing that Beethoven captured for you with black dots on white pieces of paper. Now, if you gave that same piece of paper, that sheet music, to an alien, now that alien, let's say he doesn't play the fiddle, he doesn't play the cello, he doesn't play the bass, he has no idea what this is. All he's looking at is a bunch of illustrations. So the first thing he's going to do is start scanning it using some kind of method as a base reference point in order to see what comes out of it. And so, bearing that in mind, I began to wonder, is it possible that all images in life are kind of like sheet music, and that everything is trying to give us some kind of tone, and if read properly, well, then maybe we'll learn something about the music of that thing. And the first challenge, again, goes back to point of view. I mean, let's take Stonehenge, for example. Well, Stonehenge can be shot from 1,000 different perspectives if you want a picture of it. Do you shoot it from overhead like a bird, or do you shoot it from the left or the right, or what do you know? So there is always going to be a subjective element because you have to figure out what your point of view is. But that said, I went through and I took all of these images from all of these different points of view of different things that we kind of, at this point, as humans, think of as being mystical, metaphysical, paranormal, whatever. And then I put them into this process that I invented. Now, this is something that I'm very happy to say I invented, created, developed this process, but I've been working with a number of engineers over the past year to create different components of it. So here's the gist of it. What I do is I take a picture of something. Let's start with Stonehenge. And I put that picture into a situation where it is being scanned by a number of lasers. And as it's being scanned, the image is moving. And now there are different ways of doing that, which I'll get back to in a minute. But as the image is being scanned, the laser light from the image is going into a sophisticated photoreceptor unit that takes that light that's reflected from that image and turns it into some kind of a tone. And then I take the tone and I plug that into a computer where I assimilate all of this and then put it through a process that brings out the most emphatic parts of the tone. And what I come up with is an individual tone and fingerprint for that image.
Now, Joshua, when we're talking about, you say a tone, is it a single note or is it is it symphonic in the sense that it's multiple notes and more musical than just maybe a single tone would be?
Well, that's a great question because I wouldn't say it's a single tone because we are scanning it, and so therefore I would say it's probably about 2.5 to 3 seconds worth of scan condensed into what sounds like a single tone. And by the way, you know, I as always was absolutely delighted and thrilled to come on your program tonight, but I want to just emphasize that I was literally in the middle of being the first person in human history to hear the tone created by Zeta Reticuli, the water molecule, the sun, Stonehenge, the Golden Mean, the Great Pyramid, the human DNA helix, the Lord's Prayer, the Milky Way galaxy, the Book of the Dead, the $100 bill, all this stuff when I broke to come onto this program. And so I want you to realize how fresh this is. And so being the first person to hear these tones is kind of earth-shattering because they do sound so different from each other. And some of them are a little warmer, and some are a little more electronic. Some of them sound downright creepy and eerie. And but using this process to hear these things, I'm thinking, okay, well, all right, what is the point of this? Okay, like that's the bottom line. Like, what is the point of this?
Right.
What would you think is the point of this? Before I give you my thoughts.
Well, I mean, I can see it's almost a language. It's almost a way to communicate. It's almost a way to be able to find a more I don't know if spiritual is the right word, but a spiritual language that allows information to be passed in a way that is different from its original or from the visual form that we're used to.
Well, that's a darn good explanation for this. So, what do you think, Jason? What do you think is the point of this?
Honestly, I'm with Jim on that. So,
okay, all right. Well, you know, I am right there on the edge of all this with you guys, and I'm thinking, well, if I were an alien and I knew how to play the fiddle, then I would pick this stuff up and I would play it the way it was intended to be played. But I am on my own here. I don't have any reference point. There is no human, no alien, no spiritual being giving me any guidance here whatsoever. So what I'm doing is I'm scanning these things as fresh as possible. I'm scanning every single one the same exact way. I'm capturing every one the same way. I'm processing every one the same way. And so when you hear them sound so different, I don't know what again, that like objective reference point is that you're supposed to use in order to hear them properly. But by goodness, this is the first step. This is the first step. And can you see how that I've come from this point of experimentation where I'm taking tones and turning them into images, and now taking images and turning them into tones, and I'm thinking that one way or another, this is the very first step in having the world, the universe speak to us. I mean, people have always said, obviously, like crop circles, even if they're man-made, all right, fine, they're man-made in some cases. Well, still, there's some kind of energy put in there into that pattern, and I really believe that this is the first big step in interpreting that. And all of this does tie back into my time travel experiment. So I don't want to get too disjointed here, and so you guys can tell me what direction you want to go, but you can see I'm pretty excited about where I am right now in my research here tonight in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, it sounds exciting, and it sounds also like we're going to have to continue and have a more in-depth conversation at another point, because we're down to about 20 minutes left in the program, and we do need to connect this to the time experiments and the time slip and a time anomaly that you discovered near Las Vegas. So if it's time to make that transition, sorry about the pun, let's do it now. Let's tell us how it connects.
Okay. Well, last year, which is funny to say, I guess it was in June, I was very fortunate to be the first person to experiment with the differential time rate meter, the DT meter, which was created by Silicon Valley engineer Ronald Heath. He has been a follower of my podcast and my work for a long time, and he gave me the very first unit to go out into the field with, and I discovered some kind of a time anomaly north of Las Vegas on the way to Area 51. And that time anomaly was so well documented that it was covered by the local news, and the next thing I knew, it blew up all over the place, and it was covered by international news. So I was inspired by that, and it was interesting to me that the finding this time anomaly where it looked like time had slowed down a little bit was coinciding with my work into parasimatics. And I wondered, are these connected in some way, or are these two totally separate things? Well, what I can tell you is that let's just keep with the time thing for a minute. When it comes to the time anomalies, I traveled all over Nevada and California, and I was looking for other time anomalies. I have not found another time anomaly. However, since I have produced that result, I have been getting all kinds of interesting emails from physicists and engineers saying, if we talk about time machines and stuff like that, they're going to look at us like we're insane, like we're crazy. And so they've been giving me little tips on things that I can do in order to do some time machine experiments. Time travel is a little different. I think time travel is too extreme. Time machine means you warp time at all. So, I right now I've been doing some experiments where I've been taking lasers, very, very, very powerful lasers, and sort of using them to potentially create a vortex to warp space-time. And I've been using the DT meter to see if I can make space-time warp at all. Because if so, well, that could explain a lot about what we experience here if we also realize there are natural space-time warps. Well, so far I have not been able to do that. But I have some new equipment that is coming in here this weekend that, if it works properly, is going to allow me to do the most intensive optical, I'm talking like using super lasers with fiber optics and the DT meter, one of the most intensive, potentially space-time twisting experiments that I've ever done. And so I guess what I'm saying here is that I'm right here at this precipice where I tonight have made a breakthrough getting all of these tones that are coming from these images that sometimes are from the past or from other point in space-time. I'm about to now take optical, fiber optics and, other optical effects and use them to experiment with warping space-time. And ultimately, this all is about looking at how that time and tones kind of relate into the human experience of experiencing something from the past or something from the future. And, if that makes me sound like a rambling, insane man, maybe I've finally gotten there. But you guys tell me, does all that make kind of sense to you where I'm heading with this?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The problem is it doesn't make any sense because you have so many blanks to fill in yet, right? I mean, but that's the whole point of this. This is brand new information that you've discovered it, but you haven't been able to completely explain it, and you're trying to find these connections, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very nice way of putting it because, there are, I believe there are connections here that even I haven't discovered yet.
And I think you're right. And I think this whole thing is fascinating. The fact that much of this work has been going on, but really breakthroughs were made an hour before this program began tonight, makes it even more exciting. And as you do this research, and Joshua, I'm always amazed at how you've been able to think outside of the box, if you will, and look at things from a perspective that most people wouldn't, which allows you to make these breakthroughs. Now, here's a couple things. First of all, I want to jump to the phone lines because I promised we'd get a few phone calls in here. But I want to ask you about the time slip specifically because when you discovered that and you explained it to us last time, you said it was, and I don't remember what it was microseconds or something. I don't remember exactly what the unit of measurement was, but it wasn't very, it was almost negligible, but it was there based on your study. Now, has that gap, has that slip increased at all? Have you rechecked it to see if it's getting more disparate?
Well, the anomaly that I captured was a slowdown in time of 25 microseconds per second, which for the layman time travel or physicist could be considered like 200 thousandths of a second per second. So it's very, very small.
Right.
And I have not since then measured anything larger than that. But the very fact that I measured that gives me hope that I might be able to artificially reproduce that.
Right. All right, let's jump quickly to the phone lines here. This is Vince in Missouri. Hey, Vince, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Happy New Year, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Yeah, between the time warp and the Parasimatics and the Finding Your Magic, Mr. Warren, I would like to know your outlook on 2019 for the world.
That's a pretty broad question, Vince, but it's a good one. And I actually had a question similar, and let me just throw my angle on this to you, Joshua. It's a little off topic at the moment, but you don't claim to be someone that makes predictions, but you have your finger in the air, gauging the wind of all these things we're talking about. Do you see any major breakthroughs in any of this work in this coming year?
Well, thank you for that question, Vince, and I appreciate the clarification, JV, because, as far as I'm concerned, I really do see some kind of epic culmination for 2019. I really do. And, like you said, I'm not a big predictor of the future, but I'm pretty good. I've been pretty good throughout my life at sort of figuring out what the outcome of a year is going to be, because I just keep up with the media. I keep up with scientific research. I have a certain idea about how things are going to evolve and advance. And so I think 2019 is going to be an historic year, and I believe that there's a good chance that I can contribute to that.
Thanks for the call, Vince. We appreciate that question. We've got about a minute and a half here left, and you've actually whet our appetite on all of this, Josh. So where do we go next?
Well, the next 2 months are going to be crucial in the research that I'm doing. And, if it sounds like I'm just blatantly plugging my website, so be it. If you go to joshuapwarren.com, as you know, there's no period after the P. I have a free e-newsletter there. I have a free podcast that I do on almost a daily basis. It's uncensored. It's independent. And what I do is I just tell everybody what I'm up to with these experiments every day. Sometimes my podcast is 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. But what I do is I just tell everybody what I'm up to every day. I am one of the few people in this entire world that has no allegiance to a corporation, to a government agency. Nobody can fire me. And so I have the ability to say whatever I want to, and therefore I can't tell you what else to do than just stay on top of this, because my feeling is, I don't know if you call me paranoid or whatnot, but as soon as I discover something, I'm going to blast it out there immediately. I'm not going to wait to file a patent or get a copyright or do anything like that. I'm going to blast it out there immediately. And so that's the best way to keep up with the progress that I'm making.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area of research that you're kind of just beginning to scratch the surface on here. And I hope that you will agree to come back and keep us updated as you do make additional discoveries and start to define this and get a real handle on what we're talking about.
Well, hey, next time I'll have some tones to play for you. How would you like that? Say, here you go.
That sounds
Here's
awesome.
What the Great Pyramids sound like. Here's what the sun sounds like.
Yeah.
Here's what Stonehenge sounds like. That's what I'll be doing for you next time I come on. So, Jason, JV, once again, thank you so much for having me on. And, hey, guys, what can I say? Happy New Year.
Josh, it's always a pleasure, and you have a great night, and we look forward to talking to you again. I need to talk to him at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Not like 12 o'clock at night and 1 in the morning. It's just...
I need to talk to him while he's diagramming it for me so I can actually...
if he could draw it out, I think it would be that much easier.
Much easier.
So, all right. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. We've got readings with Rebecca. And make sure you call in early, because she gives readings all night long, and the show goes fast and the lines get full. That's pretty much going to do it for us tonight. Some great shows next week. Make sure you check them out. You're listening to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll catch you all tomorrow.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y, at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.